guys, Mr. Hussey here, 6th grade math. This is Monday's lesson, solving and graphing inequalities. Just want to share a verse with you here, a Bible verse. It comes from Psalm 108, and it says, "Give us aid against the enemy, for human help is worthless. With God we will gain the victory, and he will trample down our enemies." So just want to encourage you guys that human help is worthless. Help from God is the help that matters. Okay, so let's go ahead and start today's lesson. Inequalities can be solved just like an equation, but with a few exceptions. Okay, so if you have this, then you have nice blanks to fill out. If you don't, you can't print this, then go ahead and write down the title. And you don't have to write this part. That's okay. These are the fill in the blanks for the people who've printed out the sheet. Okay, those you didn't print out the sheet, make sure you copy down number 4. So you can just title it. If you didn't print out the sheet, you can just title it. Write down number 4. It's very important. And then we're just going to talk about 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I'm going to read through those. You don't have to write those down. If you do have the sheet, then I would write those down. Okay, basically what it's saying with 1, 2, 3, and 4 is it's giving you steps to solve the inequalities. It's the exact same steps as solving equations. Okay, so remember that inequalities, we're talking about these things because it's unequal or not equal to. If we're using the word equation, an equation has an equal sign. Okay, so equations have equal signs. Inequalities have less than and equal to, less than, greater than, and greater than or equal to signs. So basically what this lesson is trying to say is that when you solve and graph these, it's very, very similar to solving and graphing these with just a few changes. Okay, here's the changes. Number 1, the variable must be alone or isolated on one side of the inequality. Actually, that's not even a change. That's the same way it was for equations. Number 2, isolate the variable by using the inverse or the opposite operation. That's also the same as when we deal with equations. Okay, you'll see once we do these, it will make more sense. Number 3, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other side. That's also the same as equations. The difference, the new thing, which I want everyone to make sure you write down, is number 4. When you multiply or divide by a negative number, the inequality sign is flipped. Okay, that's very important. So pause the video, write that down. Okay, now I gave you 2 examples here. You can write these down or you can just watch, but make sure you watch. This is very important. In this case, it says n over 5 or n divided by 5 is greater than or equal to -2. Okay, so in this case, to get rid of a divide by 5, we do the inverse, right? We do it to both sides, like number 3 says, whatever you do to one side, you also have to do the other. So the inverse of divide by 5 is times by 5. So we'll get n on this side, we'll get -10 over here. Now, does the sign flip? The sign does not flip because when you multiply or divide by a negative number, we did not do that. We got a negative answer, but we did not multiply or divide by a negative number. So this is a trick. This is a trick. A lot of students are going to want to flip this sign because they see a negative answer, but we did not multiply and divide by a negative number. We multiplied, in this case, by a positive 5 to get rid of that divide by 5. Okay. Now, on the opposite situation, when we have a situation like this, it says n divided by -5. To get rid of a divide by -5, we have to times by a -5. Because remember, what's really happening here behind the scenes, this isn't some magic trick here. What's really happening is this is saying 1n over -5. So to get rid of the 1n over -5, we have to times by what we call the reciprocal, or 5 over 1. Right? Because when you do that, you get top to top, you get -5n over -5, and -5 divided by -5 is 1. So when you do all that behind the scenes, you're getting 1n. Okay, it's just a lot of teachers will simplify this and they'll say, okay, what's the opposite of divide by -5? the opposite of divide by -5 is times by -5. Or you can say the inverse if you don't like saying the opposite. So when you do this, this crosses off to 1n based on all this legwork here. It's not magic. This legwork here shows us it crosses off to 1n, or just n. And this side over here, 2 times -5, because we have to, if we multiply this side by -5, we have to multiply that side by -5. So 2 times -5 is -10. And then in this case, the sign does flip. By flip, we mean it changes the direction, okay? The reason it flips is because we multiplied or divided. In this case, we multiplied, right? We multiplied by a negative number, by a -5, so our sign flips. So in this case, the way you would read this is n is greater than or equal to -10. So numbers like -10, -9, -8, numbers that are warmer than -10, greater than, right, or better in terms of owing someone money. It's better to owe someone -9 than -10. Over here, you would read it as n is less than or equal to -10. So numbers like -10, -11, -12, -13, because those numbers are less than -10, or colder, or further down in the ground if you're digging, okay? And you got to be real careful to pay attention to what that means in order to get the problem correct, okay? So those are just two examples. You can write those down. It might actually help you to write those down. Now let's go ahead and look at the problems we're going to do today, okay? So number 1 says n plus 5 is less than or equal to 16. N plus 5 is less than or equal to 16. Okay, so what we got to do is we got to isolate that n, right? Get the variable isolated according to our notes. Do the inverse of the operation, the opposite to isolate it. So the opposite of a plus 5 is a minus 5, just like we did last week with the equations. This will cross off. We'll get n is less than or equal to 11. In that case, you don't have to flip any signs because we're not even dealing with multiplication or division. So you don't have to even worry about flipping the signs. So your answer is n is less than or equal to 11. Okay? So when we go ahead and draw our line, here's what it's going to look like. We're going to have to make sure we put an 11 in there. And then let's put a number above 11, like 12, and a number below 11, like 10. And then if it's less than or equal to 11, well, it could indeed be equal to 11. So we got to fill in that circle because it could be that one spot, but it could also be less than. So it's going to go that way because it could be 10, it could be 9, it could be 8. Okay? Now, some students like to always point this arrow the same as that. You got to be careful with that, all right? You got to use your brain and really think, because sometimes you might hit a situation like this. Okay, and that's saying n, if you start with the n and read this way, that's saying n is less than or equal to 11. But you might get confused and put the arrow this way, and that would not be true. It would not be true to put your arrow this way because n is less than or equal to 11. So your arrow would still go this way. Now the way it works, and some teachers may have taught you this, if you always put the variable in the front, if you always make sure that that n is in the front, then your little trick will work, where this arrow points the same way as that arrow. I don't like to think about that because it's just too much like brainless, not thinking, and it can get you in trouble. When you're brainless and you don't think, it can get you in trouble. So I like to think, what is this statement saying? It's saying n is less than or equal to 11. As long as you understand that this is still saying n is less than or equal to 11, then you could flip it right now and say n is less than or equal to 11, and then your arrow situation will work. But I really encourage you to think through what it's saying to get that arrow correct. If it doesn't make sense yet, hopefully after a few more problems it will make more sense. Okay, let's look at number 2. C minus 9 is greater than 14. Okay. So to get rid of the minus 9, we want the c by itself, right? So to get rid of the minus 9, we do the opposite or the inverse, which is plus 9. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. The 9s will cross off. You'll get c is greater than 23. So when you do your line this time, we want to make sure we have a 23 on there. What's a number above 23? Let's show a little math swag and put 25. So we're going up by 2. All right. So let's go down by 2. 21. All right, we can do that as long as it makes sense, right? So c is greater than 23. Now, could it be 23? No, because it doesn't say c is equal to 23. It doesn't say c is greater than or equal to 23. So c could not be 23. So 23 has to be hollow. It could not be that one particular spot. Okay? So if it's c is greater than 23, then it could be 23, 24, 25, 26. So our arrow has to go that way. C is greater than 23. Okay, some people put their bubble right here. That's fine too. Okay, some people like to put their little circle above the line. Some people like to put it on the line. Whatever you like better. Okay, let's look at number 3. Okay, number 3. Now we're getting into some multiplication division problems. So for number 3, it says 12g is less than 48. How do we get that g by itself? Well, 12 times g. So the opposite is divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 12. You'll get g is less than 4. So we got to put a 4. If g is less than 4, then it can't be equal, so we can't fill that in. But it could be 3, it could be 2, it could be 1. All right, number 4. We got p over 3 is greater than, that's a number 9, it's not a q, so that could be a little confusing. P over 3 is greater than 9. So what we're going to do here is p divided by 3. Well, the opposite of divided by 3 is times, so we'll times, if we times this side by 3, we have to times this side by 3. 3 divided by 3, right, crosses off, so that's 1. Doesn't just happen magically, right? It happens through this process up here. That we talked about in our notes. And if you're struggling with what's happening behind the scenes and you want to ask me, I'd be more than happy to help you with that. Okay, but there's a reason why these cross off. It's not magic. All right. So when I times both sides by 3, we're going to get p is greater than 27. So when we do our little line here, there has to be a 27. And if it's greater than 27, we'll have the hollow circle, right? And then it could be, because it can't be equal to 27, and it could go up that way. Okay, it could be 28, could be 29. A lot of times people, there'll be like an ABC choice here, and they'll do something like this. And so many students will get to here, right? They'll circle this, and then they'll pick choice B. But they're thinking that that's an equal sign, but that's not an equal sign. So you could not pick choice B on a test, right? You have to pick choice C because P is greater than 27. Which of these could be true? Well, answer C could be true. It could be 28. All right, let's look at some more problems. On your second sheet of paper today, the one that says homework, okay? But we're trying not to stress kids out by saying you have homework and classwork. So I'm just calling, it's the sheet that says homework, but it's our classwork for today. So let's take a look at number 1 there. Okay, so for number 1, we're going to take 3x is less than 54. Okay. To get that x by itself or isolate the x, right? We want to get rid of the 3. So to get rid of 3 times x, we're going to divide by 3. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So x is going to be less than, what's that going there? 118 times. X is less than 18. Okay, so when we do our line here, you gotta have an 18, a 19, a set. You always take that number, make sure that's on your line. Okay, that will dictate what numbers go on your line. So when x is less than 18, you'll put a circle at the 18. Make sure our arrow goes this way. Okay. All right, number 2, I'm going to have you do on your own. I'm going to have you do 3 on your own. Just to check these, the way you check them is you take your answer, like 18, x is less than 18. You put it in here. And then 3 times 18. Let me just make sure I'm teaching you that the way they want to do it. Here, in this case, you'd actually have to take a number that's like, instead of taking the 18, you'd have to take a number that's like less than 18. So for instance, like 17, and you'd have to plug it in here. So say we plugged in a 17 at the very beginning. What's 3 times 17? So you'd get 51 is less than, remember we're starting the thing with 54 there, the problem with 54. So is that true? And it is true. 51 is less than 54, so we know we did it correctly. Okay, so that's how you check your answers. And that's going to be important to you after a couple more questions here. So I want you to do number 2. I want you to do number 3. Okay, let's take a look at number 4. So go ahead, pause the video, do 2 and 3, and then let's take a look at 4. 4 says, choose the inequality that could be used to solve each problem. Which inequality is true when x equals 4? Which inequality is true when x equals 4? So we're right here on this problem. All right, let's just start plugging in 4. So when we plug in a 4 here, what's 4 plus 5? That's 9, right? Is 9 less than or equal to 3? So if we add a 4 here, which gives us a 9 for the whole thing, is 9 less than or equal to 3? Nope, so it can't be that one, right? How about a 4 here? What's 9 times 4? Well, that's 36. Is 36 greater than 36? Nope, can't be that one because they're equal, right? So it can't be B. How about over here? What if we take a 4? What's 4 over 2? Well, 4 over 2 is 2. Is 2 less than 3? Yeah, it looks like that's our answer. Let's just take a look here. What happens if we put a 4 here? X equals 4, right? What's 4 plus 8? Well, that's 12. Is 12 greater than or equal to 18? No. So your answer for number 4 has to be C, and you do have to show some work for that. So x over 2 is less than 3. So the way we'll show our work, sorry, there's number 4. For your answer is C. Because when we plug in our 4, well, 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 is indeed less than 3. That's a true statement. So that's why our answer is C for that one. Let's take a look at number 5. Jasmine is baking and selling cupcakes for $15 per dozen. She would like to make more than 120 in cupcake sales. Which number line below represents the solution to this situation? Okay, well, how many is a dozen? A dozen is 12. Okay, a baker's dozen is 13. I guess the baker's throw an extra donut in there to be nice, or cupcake. But a dozen is 12. So Jasmine is baking and selling cupcakes for $15 per dozen. She'd like to make more than 120. So if she'd like to make more than 120, she wants to make, let's write this down. She wants to make greater than 120. She wants to make greater than 120. Okay, now, if there are 15 cupcakes, okay, greater than 120. Now, it's not greater than or equal to. So let's cross off A and D. A and D won't work because these, when you fill in the circle, that means greater than or equal to. Now, let's just say like $120 divided by the 15 divided by the what, $15 per dozen. So let's divide it by 15 and see what we get. Okay, let's do 120 divided by 15. I know 15 times 10 is 150. So 9 would be 135, 8 would be 120. So it looks like she can sell $15 per dozen times 8 dozen. Looks like she can sell 8 dozen donuts or cupcakes. She can sell 8 dozen, and 8 of those, or 8 times 15, will give her 120. So that's not good enough. She doesn't want to make 120. She wants to make more than 120. So she'd have to sell more than 8 dozen. Okay, more than 8 dozen in order to get what she wants. So this looks here like this one looks like it's going to well, not looks like, this one is going less than 8. So that would be showing like if she sold less than 8 dozen. This one here would be showing if she sold more than the number 8, which in this case means dozen. So we'd have to go with B. Okay, and you'd have to show some of this work up here to show me you're making some sense out of that. Okay, so you see my thought process right off the bat. I crossed off these because it doesn't make any sense. So now we're down to a 50-50. Okay, and then if this isn't making sense to you, well, if she'd like to make more than 120, then she can't make less than 8 dozen, right? She has to make more than 8 dozen. So a lot of times if you think about things like from the overall perspective, right, or the big view or the big picture, you can knock out a lot of problems just simply that way. All right. All right, let's look at number 6. The number line below represents the solution to which inequality? Okay. Well, let's start to work these out. This one here, we'd minus a 16, and we'd get x is less than 7. Okay. Well, it's almost that. It looks like it is less than 7, but this is a less than or equal to sign because that's filled in. So let's use that same thought process here. Let's just cross off A and D right now because those have the less than signs. Okay, and this has to be less than or equal to because it's filled in. I'm trying to figure out which one of these it is. If we divided this by 5, you would get x is greater than or equal to 7. So it doesn't look like that because greater than or equal to 7 would have to be more than 7 or equal to 7, right? So 8, 9, 10. So it looks like it's going to be this one. So you get x is less than or equal to 7. X is less than or, well, this is equal to 7, right? And then all of these are less than 7, so it's going to be C. So that's your answer. Okay. Now, I found it interesting that they didn't have any problems on these notes we took at the beginning of class. They didn't have any situations where we had to flip these signs. So coming up soon, I'm going to give you some problems where you have to flip the signs or not flip the signs. Okay, this was today's lesson. So we're at about 25 minutes here, plus the couple extra minutes that you had to do these, okay, plus maybe some minutes you had to pause the video. So we're trying not to go over like 40 minutes a day, as if this was like a real class. So hope you guys are well. This is Monday's lesson, and take care, guys. Thanks for your hard work.